This is the Farm Monitor. For over 50 years, your source for agribusiness news and features from around the Southeast and across the country, focusing on one of the nation's top industries, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by one of the largest general farm organizations, the Georgia Farm Bureau. Now here are your hosts, Ray DeLessio and Kenny Burgamy.
Well, most of that is true with one exception. The person sitting next to me, not Kenny Burgamy. No, she is Farm Monitor contributor Jennifer Parson, who is filling in for Kenny this week. Welcome to the show. And of course, you know, that's a big chair to fill, some big shoes to fill.
Yes, I'm very aware how legendary Kenny Burgamy is.
No pressure.
And I'm just excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're fine. You're going to be fine. Of course, normally we see Jennifer out in the field reporting on special features. In fact, she has another one coming up a bit later. But since you are filling in for Kenny, we're going to let you have the honors of telling everybody what else we have on tap for the show.
All right, let's do this. Coming up, with the threat of frigid temperatures still looming, it's important for citrus producers to stay on top of things and take preventative measures if need be. Damon Jones on what some of those measures are. Well, that story Ray mentioned, it was a fun one. We're going to dive into the world of sheep breeding and hear from a breeder here in Georgia about the different kinds of wool textures and what certain colors mean. And then later, chances are Georgia isn't the first state that comes to mind when you think of bourbon. But at the very least, these three business owners wanted to be part of the discussion. These stories and so much more start right now on the Farm Monitor.
Well, as we told you last week, Christmas weekend wasn't the most wonderful time of the year for Georgia fruit growers, as historically low temperatures had them scrambling to frost protect their crop. Damon Jones tells you what measures had to be taken and how much damage their crop received.
While cold temperatures are to be expected in December, having them dip into the teens is very unusual in Georgia and a major cause for concern amongst producers. It's why they were left with some tough decisions on very short notice after a severe cold front to end 2022.
Well, we started trying to prepare the best we could, watched every weather report that came out, and so we made sure that our frost protection was ready to go. We made sure that our row covers were ready to go. And of course, we had everything on the farm to make sure we had the water out of it to make sure it didn't burst.
With strawberries being the furthest along, getting them protected was a priority. And while they were caught a little short-handed, it appears this year's crop was salvaged despite some minor damage.
With the strawberries, we use row covers. It's just like a blanket, like we use in our homes. And some of our strawberries, we used one row cover, and on some we used two row covers. And we found that the two was much better than the one. We think where we use two row covers, we're pretty well going to be on schedule. We really don't think it affected them that much. But where we used only one cover, probably going to be a month behind with the fruiting.
Protecting the citrus crop is a little more labor intensive, as each tree must be individually taken care of before the freezing temperatures.
With the citrus, we use wraps or tunnels or teepees. And inside of that wrap or teepee is an emitter that emits water, and it's a spray. And the theory is that it'll create heat inside of that wrap and keep the graft of that tree warm enough that it doesn't damage it.
While these trees did suffer damage, the extent won't be known for quite some time. However, the rest of the crop appears to be in good condition.
With the citrus, it's just way too early to tell. We're thinking it'll be 6 months to a year before we can really know just how bad it's hurt us. With the rest of our fruit, though, we have plums and blackberries, and if you can grow it in South Georgia, we just about grow it. We really don't think we're going to see any effects.
Even though this type of weather might be out of the norm, it is something growers will need to keep in the back of their minds when planning for the future, which is why this event can serve as a good learning experience when preparing for the next growing season.
I hope we learn a lot from this, and I hope that the University of Georgia and the Citrus Association, I hope they gather information from all the growers across South Georgia, and we can kind of figure out what worked best, what didn't work, And so, yes, I'm hopeful that this is going to be a learning experience, and that we'll gain some wisdom from it.
Reporting from Berrien County, I'm Damon Jones for the Farm Monitor.
Meantime, there's a good chance you've never heard of sheep's milk cheese, at least maybe not here in the U.S. anyway. But around the world in places like Spain and Italy, it's very popular and has an excellent reputation. As John Holcomb reports, there's now one operation in Walker County that has started the state's first sheep dairy and creamery, and working to make sheep's milk cheese a reality in Georgia.
Here at this farm in northwest Georgia, these ewes are getting to enjoy some R&R before starting their next production cycle, a time in which they produce milk that will be made into artisan sheep's milk cheeses. This, of course, not a common practice here in the U.S., but is something Brent Smith and Hannah Walker set out to do 4 years ago, and now have what they believe is the only sheep dairy in the state.
We bought this farm in 2019, and there was nothing out here. There was no driveway, no culvert, and no fences. There were pastures, but the weeds were up about head high. So since 2019, we've been developing everything that's out here. And the first thing we built was the milking parlor and the creamery.
After getting the farm up and running, they started working to build up their flock, one that produces the best quality milk and will do well here in Georgia.
We have East Friesians and St. Croix. East Friesians are the typical dairy breed. They have high quantity milk, so that usually gives them a little bit less butter fat. So adding the St. Croix, not only is St. Croix more parasite resistant, they also have more butter fat in their milk, so it helps make really great cheese. And we want to get the St. Croix parasite resistance into the flock down in Georgia, just because there's a lot of parasites down here in sheep.
As you can see, however, their hard work has paid off. They've managed to build up a great flock and have perfected the cheese-making process, and now make several different types of delicious sheep's milk cheeses that take the farmers' markets in the area by storm, something they take great pride in, as sheep's milk cheese has quite the reputation around the world.
Some of the best cheeses in the world are sheep's milk cheeses. Pecorino Romano out of Italy, Manchego out of Spain, Roquefort out of France. Those are all award-winning cheeses that are all made out of sheep's milk. And anywhere you travel throughout the rest of the world, people make cheese out of sheep's milk, goat's milk, and cow's milk. And they probably have more cheeses made out of sheep and goat's milk than they do out of cow's milk. But in the United States, the cow dairy is the king of the dairies, and most of our cheeses are made out of cow's milk cheeses.
Unfortunately, though, Smith says that presents quite the challenge for them, as many don't know about or have never had sheep's milk cheese.
People don't know about sheep's milk cheese, and some are not only hesitant, they don't want to try it because they think it's too different. So they're very hesitant in a lot of cases to even try it. But if we can get them to try it, over 90% of them really like it. So it's just the fact that we're into a territory where people don't really know about our product very much. And because of that, we sample it and we try to educate.
Reporting in Lafayette for the Farm Monitor, I'm John Holcomb.
All right, John, thanks so much. Well, true or false? If a sheep's coat appears yellow in color, it means the presence of lanolin. Yes? No? After the break, a trip to Dooley County for the answer.
Welcome to Ag Lab. Today our question is, what is the hydrologic cycle? The hydrologic cycle, also commonly known as the water cycle, is the endless and continuous movement of water on, above, and below the Earth's surface. You might think the water in your drinking glass or the rain puddles on the pavement is new, but it has actually always been here and is just part of the water cycle. So, where did the water in your glass come from? How is the water in your glass related to the water in the ocean or the clouds in the sky? Let's follow a droplet of water as it circulates through the cycle. We start in the ocean, the largest source of water on Earth. Although there are many water droplets in the ocean, the heat from the sun can warm and turn them into water vapor. This process is called evaporation. As water vapor continues to heat up, water droplets are gradually swept away from the ocean by warm winds. Eventually, the vapor is pushed upwards by warm air. As the vapor moves upward, it meets colder air, causing it to chill and return to liquid form. This process is called condensation. Some of that vapor gets so cold that it can freeze, turning into tiny ice crystals. These small ice crystals eventually cluster together and become part of a cloud. When a cloud gets too heavy and big, some of it might fall away. Our water droplet tumbles from the sky towards the ground. This process is called precipitation. Our water droplet makes it back to land as rain, snow, or even hail. It can sink into the soil as groundwater, flow along the ground into a stream as runoff, or make its way back to the ocean to restart the whole cycle again. Sometimes, however, water stays on land, where it can be used for drinking and washing. Surface water is especially important because we also use it for irrigation to help us grow crops. Without irrigation, it would be impossible to produce the fruits, vegetables, and grains that we need to feed ourselves. To make sure water gets to where it needs to be, ARS scientists across the country are finding newer and better ways to manage our water. In Beltsville, Maryland, we're closely monitoring the planet's soil, moisture, and water stress through the NASA-launched Soil Moisture Active Passive (SMAP) satellite. Data from this satellite helps farmers by providing more accurate crop yield and weather forecasts in the arid southwestern U.S. We're developing new irrigation systems, sensor technologies, and water management practices to fight drought and wildfire in the arid southwestern U.S. And in California, scientists have saved millions of gallons of water on farms by developing an automated irrigation scheduling system that applies water to where and when it's needed most. You can find out more about the water cycle, irrigation, and efficient water use by visiting our website and searching for hydrology. We look forward to seeing you next time. For AgLab, I'm Kelly Harmon.
Sure, you've seen them, and with the recent cold spell, you may have even worn one of their coats. As part of the Mobile Ag Ventures for the Ag in the Classroom program, I got the opportunity to visit White Gates Farm in Dooley County. Once there, I not only learned where wool comes from, but also that no two wool textures or colors are exactly the same. Linda Willis is a shepherd of her sheep at White Gates Farm.
I was raised in England. My father farmed.
Her love of farming continued when she attended agriculture college.
I've always been a country girl, and the sheep part of it came, like I said, when we went to Wales, and I said my quest was to have sheep in Georgia.
At a wedding with her husband, her dream of raising sheep was born.
And I started out with 2.
This is off one sheep. It was quite a large sheep, as you can tell.
They've got a lot of yellow in here, so that's a lot of lanolin.
And that's where it goes into all your creams that you use.
She loves raising her sheep here in Georgia. And uses the wool from her friends for all kinds of things.
So much you can do with wool. I can have it made into blankets. Nothing better than a wool jacket.
Did you know that the wool is different depending on the sheep that grows it?
This is from one sheep, and so they've got a lot of yellow in here, so that's a lot of lanolin. And then if we were to look at this other fleece, this is a smaller sheep.
And they measure the wool fibers by microns.
Isn't it amazing? You can see those fibers there, how it's holding together. And look, I can pull and pull, and it's not going to come apart. That's how strong this is.
But isn't wool itchy?
Not anymore. That's the old style of way they used to process it. Wool doesn't make you itch anymore, it just keeps you warm.
Not only does wool keep you warm in the winter, it can keep you cool in the summer too.
I know these smart wool socks that you can buy are great socks. They are 100% wool, and they do keep your feet warm, but then hikers enjoy it because if their feet get hot, they also will wick away that moisture.
Miss Linda shears her sheep in late spring, early summer.
See how thick this is? Can you imagine if you're a sheep having to have this on your back all through the hot summer in Georgia? So that's why we choose to shear our sheep.
I asked Miss Linda if it hurts the sheep when they take the wool off.
To be honest, it's just like us when we go and get our hair cut. It doesn't hurt us, does it? We come out with a new look, and that's exactly what the sheep do.
Once sheared, the wool will be washed and turned into a blanket, a coat, or even mittens. So how much wool do you think you need to make a blanket?
Maybe a twin size blanket, at least probably you'd need 20 pounds of wash wool. To make a pair of mittens, I don't think you'd need very much at all. Hello, sweet girl.
And no farm would be complete without a canine companion like Lily.
It's an Akbash, and that's spelled A-K-B-A-S-H. And Lily is a certain breed of dog, and what her job is, she guards the sheep at night and during the day. And if she hears coyotes in the distance, she will howl and warn them off and say, "Don't come over here, this is where I live."
Miss Linda and Lily have lots to do on their farm, but one thing is for sure.
And the feel of wool, to me, there's nothing better.
For more on where wool comes from and other activities, visit the Ag in the Classroom section of our website at gfb.ag/AITC.
Up next, they love the earth, the soil, and the challenges of growing specialty crops. And they also enjoy the fine art of bourbon making. The story of Doc Brown Farm and Distillers when the Farm Monitor continues. As we all know, there is no I in team. But there are multiple I's in Doc Brown Farm and Distillers. And teamwork is what this organization is most proud of.
We're all different. We have similarities, but we have differences, and we all bring something different to the table.
Paige Dockweiler, the Doc in Doc Brown. Born in Cordele and raised on a farm, Paige's father was a successful soybean, watermelon, cotton, and corn producer. Paige, however, pursued a different path. When she's not making spirits, Paige is focused on lifting the spirits of others as a registered nurse and specialist in oncology and hematology.
I tell people, and we've trademarked the phrase high heels and cornfields, because we've basically traded our high heels and suits in for cornfields and boots.
Amy Brown spent 32 years in the corporate world, and like Paige, she too has deep ties to agriculture, having grown up on a small farm in Hog Mountain. And lastly, there's Amy's son, Dan, a full-time pilot for UPS who admits flying isn't his only passion.
Yeah, you know what's funny is a lot of pilots are farmers also. So a lot of times the guy I'm flying with owns land or grew up on a farm, and so we can relate to each other about what each of us do on our off time. So, you know, and then when I am up there flying, I make my to-do list of things I need to do when I get back home.
Yes, Dan, Amy, and Paige each have a lot on their plates, but it hasn't stopped them from pursuing that one common goal of making quality spirits the old way, using heirloom grains grown directly on their farm. The grain of choice? Jimmy red corn.
It's a red variety of corn that grows, of course, as you can see, deep red burgundy. And we harvested it. We took it to the grist mill, had it ground into a specific type of grit type substance, but the grits have to be a little bit more grainy for the mash. This year we added a white called Hastings Prolific, and then also a blue corn called a Blue Claridge. But we all come from families that love the land.
For us, with our end product being bourbon and growing these rare heirloom corns that many people have forgotten about, bringing back the heritage and the legacy of the Indian culture and this Indian corn that they used to eat. And of course it is edible in some ways, but we use it to distill. And for me, I have a lot of pride in knowing that we're growing this heirloom corn as clean as we can. We're distilling it, it's as clean as it can be distilled, and using the waters that we have up in North Georgia.
Never in a million years rated I think I would be a farmer. Or add on to that, a bourbon maker, and I call myself a bourbon farmer, and that's usually the phrase that catches people's attention, because you can be a corn farmer, a soybean farmer, a watermelon farmer, but when you say you're a bourbon farmer, that brings a lot of interest, because they're like, I didn't know bourbon grew out on the land, and that's where you get to tell your story of the love of the earth and the love of the land and the end product.
And like any good farmer will tell you, be it a traditional farmer or, in Amy's case, a bourbon farmer, achieving that end product is not a race. No, in fact, it's more like a marathon. But oh, once you cross that finish line, the feeling is one of relief, joy, and euphoria. Then again, that might be the bourbon talking.
You know, when you harvest the corn and you grind it and you distill it and you put it in the barrel, then you have to wait, and you're like, oh man, I hope it's good, you know? And then when you get a glass of it out and it's actually good, it's really a great moment, because, you know, you created that. And, you know, it's a really cool thing, to be able to taste the flavors of the corn and the grains together. It's really cool.
When people think of bourbon, this is no offense, they think, oh, Kentucky.
That's right.
How do we change that stigma? How do we get them involved in, you know, because there's good bourbon here in Georgia.
Absolutely.
You guys.
Absolutely. Well, that's the new narrative, and that's the narrative, hopefully, that we can help change. Kentucky definitely, I mean, look at what they've done and done well, and bourbon originated there, and by no means are we trying to even mimic anything that they're doing, but what we're trying to say is that it doesn't all have to originate in Kentucky. You have to have two things to have good bourbon, actually three things. You gotta have good grain, you gotta have good water, and you gotta have good barrels. And we're fortunate that in the state of Georgia, we are able to gather all three of those components together. We have fabulous corn. We use the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountain limestone filtered water out of a deep, deep well. And then, believe it or not, our barrels are made here in Georgia as well at a place called the Gainesville Cooperage. It's the only cooperage in the state of Georgia. So everything we do, Ray, is Georgia grown. From our corn to the water to even our barrels. We don't even get our barrels outside of the state. So we're just trying to change the narrative. We're certainly not bumping anybody out of the way. We're just asking for a seat at the table. And that seat at the table is, there's some people in Georgia that work hard and love what they do and can create just as good of a product as Kentucky can.
Good times, good spirits, more importantly, three very good people. Speaking of good people, my friend, you knocked it out of the park. Congratulations. Thank you so much for filling in. But we do have one last order of business, so I'm going to let you take that as well.
Absolutely. Before we send you on your way, a friendly reminder that for all the latest ag news regarding food, incredible recipes, and what's happening on Georgia farms, be sure to check out all of our social media platforms, including farm-monitor.com. Take care, everybody, and thanks for watching another edition of the Farm Monitor.
Stay safe. Have a great week.